The tree looks a little small this year, don't you think? I feel like last year's was bigger. Or maybe it's just the placement, you might want to move it closer to the window.
It's the same size as last year, 7 feet. I measured before I bought it. But I can look at the window thing, see if the light hits it better over there.
No, don't stress yourself. I'm just saying, for a 2-story house this size, you might want to go bigger next year. I just think it would fill the room better. But it's fine, it's cute.
And that was how it usually went. The kind of comment that doesn't leave a mark you can point to. The kind you carry home anyway. Renata had been awake since 5:30 the morning before. Not 5:30 the day of the morning before. Christmas Eve. She had started with the floors because the floors were the thing nobody noticed unless they were wrong. She had wiped the baseboards with a damp cloth, moved furniture to reach the corners, and by 8 a.m. she had already run 1 load of towels so the guest bathroom would smell like something clean and warm when people walked in. She bought the wreath for the front door at a nursery 40 minutes away because the ones at the grocery store had plastic berries, and she didn't want plastic berries on her door. That is the kind of detail that tells you who Renata is. Not that she is particular, that she cares about what the door looks like when the people she loves come through it. By noon on Christmas Eve, the yams were in the oven. Not a yam dish, the yams par-cooked, the way her mother-in-law Celestine had shown her 2 Thanksgivings ago, so they would finish right on Christmas Day without getting soft. She had driven 40 minutes that morning to the grocery store on the other side of town because that was the store Celestine preferred, and she had not been asked to do that, she had just done it. She had written place cards in her own handwriting. She had wrapped 9 gifts, including 3 for Desiree's children, and labeled them the way children like, with their names in big letters. She had tested the string lights twice. If you have ever poured yourself into something completely a holiday, a dinner, a season, and then stood in the middle of it watching people walk past everything you made without once asking how it got there, drop the word "scene" in the comments right now. You are watching Tales and Bants. Hit subscribe if you are new here, because what happens next in this house is not something you want to come in on late. By the time the family was supposed to arrive at 2 o'clock, Renata had been working across 2 days and had slept 4 hours in between. She showered at 1:15. She put on the green dress she had bought in October, not for herself, really, but because she had seen it and thought, that is a Christmas dress. She came downstairs and stood at the edge of the dining room and looked at the table, the candles, the place cards. The centerpiece she had made from pine branches and dried oranges she had prepared the week before, the whole kitchen smelling of cloves for 3 days. She lit the candles. She heard the first car pull into the driveway at 2:08. She recognized the sound. It was Marcus's cousin Jerome and his wife Patris, right on time, good people. She smiled and went to the door. Desiree's car would not arrive for another 2 hours. And the tree, the 7-foot Fraser fir she had selected herself, driven home in the back of her SUV with the seat folded down, decorated over the course of an evening with ornaments she had been collecting since the first year she and Marcus were married, was already lit and full and exactly where she had placed it. It was not small, but by the time Desiree said so, it didn't matter what it was. Desiree did not apologize for being 2 hours late. She came through the door the way she always came through doors, coat still on, mid-sentence with someone on the phone, one of her kids already running past Renata's legs without a word. She ended the call, looked around the room the way you look around a hotel lobby when you are deciding if it meets your standards, and said, "Hey, everybody," to no one in particular. Then she said the thing about the tree. Renata was standing close enough that she could have said something. She knew that. She was 6 feet away with a dish towel folded over her forearm, and she was close enough to respond, to ask what exactly Desiree meant by small, to let the room sit with the question. She did not. She unfolded the dish towel, refolded it the other way, and went back to the kitchen to check on the mac and cheese. This is the thing about being the woman who holds everything together in a family that does not notice it is being held. You learn early that speaking up costs more than it returns. Not because you are weak, because you have done the math. You have seen what happens when a woman like Renata says, actually, I measured it in a room full of people who came to have a good time. She becomes the problem. Desiree stays the personality. Renata had done that math so many times she could run it in her sleep. Marcus was in the living room when it happened. He had heard it. She knew he heard it because she saw his jaw shift, that small, sideways movement he made when something landed wrong, and he was deciding whether to let it go. He let it go. He crossed the room and hugged his sister and said, Des, you look good, and the moment passed the way those moments always passed in that house. Quietly, without a witness. If you have ever watched someone you love choose the easier version of the moment, not out of cruelty, just out of habit, and you said nothing because you had learned that nothing was the safer word, drop real in the comments. You know exactly what room Renata was standing in. You are watching Tails and Bants. She checked the mac and cheese. It was fine. It was more than fine. It had the crust on top that takes patience to get right, the kind that means you pulled it at exactly the right minute. She pressed one finger lightly to the edge of the dish, still hot. 2 hours later, Desiree would tell Marcus's cousin the mac and cheese was cold. And Marcus would be in the other room when she said it. Nobody said anything about the gift table. Renata had arranged it the night before by height, by recipient, the tags facing out so people could find their names without moving anything. She had thought about it. She had made a decision about it. And sometime between Desiree arriving and dinner being called, the table had been rearranged. The bigger boxes moved to the front. The ones with Desiree's children's names closest to the edge, easiest to reach. Renata noticed it when she came out of the kitchen to let everyone know the food was ready. She stood there for 1 second looking at a table that was no longer the table she had made. Then she told everyone dinner was ready. At the table there were 8 people and 1 empty chair where Desiree's oldest had been sitting before he wandered off to find the television. Renata had cooked for all of them. The greens, the cornbread, the turkey that had been in the oven since before most of them woke up that morning. She had thought about what each person at that table liked and made a version of Christmas that tried to hold all of it. Jerome's wife Patris had said, when she sat down, Renata, this looks incredible. That was the first time anyone had said anything close to that all day. Renata had smiled and told her to pass the bread her way. Then Desiree, who had been quiet for approximately 4 minutes, said it about the mac and cheese, not loudly, almost conversationally to Marcus's cousin sitting next to her. It's a little cold, right? I think it sat too long. The cousin made a face that was not agreement but was not disagreement either. The face of someone who did not want to be involved. If you have ever made something with everything you had, your time, your care, your specific knowledge of what people needed, and watched someone diminish it in the same breath they used to eat it, drop still in the comments. Because Renata was still at that table, still passing dishes, still making sure everyone had what they needed. You are watching Tails and Bants. Marcus heard it. Renata saw his hand stop for just a moment over the bread basket. Then he picked up the rolls and passed them to his left, and the conversation moved on the way conversations move on when nobody wants to hold the thing that just happened. At the end of dinner, with the plates still in front of them, Desiree put both hands flat on the table and said she had a thought. She said it the way people say things they have been planning to say for a while but want to sound spontaneous. She said, you know what, next year we should just do it at my place. Give Renata a break. A little more space, a little more organized. I think it would be good for everybody. 3 people laughed, 2 people went quiet. Patris looked at her plate. Marcus said, Des, you might be biting off more than you can chew. And then he reached for his glass. The family moved to the living room the way families do after a big meal, slowly, in pieces, carrying drinks and dessert plates, somebody already arguing about what to watch. Renata started clearing the table. Nobody offered to help. That is not an accusation, it is just what happened. Jerome refilled his glass and followed Marcus toward the couch. Patris gathered her children. Desiree was already in the good chair by the window, the one with the ottoman, her shoes off, her phone in her hand. Renata carried the first stack of dishes to the kitchen and came back for the second. And by the time she returned, the dining room was empty, and the sound from the living room had settled into the low. Even noise of a movie nobody had agreed on, but nobody was fighting about either. She ran the water hot to start. There was a pot, the large one, the one she had used for the greens, that did not fit in the dishwasher. It never had. She had known when she bought it that it would always be a by-hand pot, and she had bought it anyway because it was the right size for the amount of greens she made when the whole family came. She lifted it into the sink and added dish soap and let it soak while she loaded everything else. The silverware, the serving spoons, the good casserole dish she only brought out twice a year. Through the walls she could hear the movie. She could hear Desiree laugh at something, that specific laugh, the full one she did when she was relaxed and comfortable and entirely at home. Renata kept loading the dishwasher. By the time she got back to the pot, the water had gone cold. She did not notice immediately. She was washing and her hands were moving, and she was thinking about something she could not have named if you asked her. Not thinking, exactly, more like existing in the particular stillness that comes when your body is occupied and your mind has gone somewhere quiet and a little far away. And then she felt it, the temperature of the water on the backs of her hands. Cold. She had been standing there longer than she knew. The movie was still going. Desiree laughed again. Someone turned up the volume slightly, and the sound came through the wall more clearly now, voices and music, the particular warmth of a room full of people enjoying themselves. Renata stood at the sink in the green dress. The kitchen was clean behind her. Every surface she had worked on for 2 days was clean. The centerpiece was still on the dining table. Nobody had moved it. Nobody had said anything about it. It was just still there in a room that was now empty. She could see it from where she was standing if she turned her head. She did not turn her head. She stood in the cold water with the pot, and she understood something she had been not understanding for a long time. Not a new thought. The kind of thought that has been waiting in a back room and finally walks out and sits down across from you and doesn't say anything because it doesn't need to. She was in her own house. That was the part that kept arriving. Not the comment about the tree, not the gift table rearranged without a word, not the announcement at the end of dinner said brightly, casually, like a good idea instead of what it was. All of that she had metabolized in real time, the way she always did, quietly and without evidence. But this, the cold water, the empty dining room, the sound of laughter coming through the wall of a house she had cleaned and cooked and arranged and shown up for completely. This she could not metabolize. She was invisible in the place she belonged most. And nobody was coming to the kitchen to check on her. She had not drained the sink yet. She was not ready to be done, which did not make sense, except that finishing the pot meant the kitchen was finished, and the kitchen being finished meant she would have to go back out there. Into the living room, back into the shape of the evening. She was not ready to put that shape back on, so she kept her hands in the water even though there was nothing left to wash. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Not Marcus's, she knew his footsteps, the particular weight of them, the way he moved through a house like he was always slightly late for something. These were slower, more deliberate, the footsteps of someone who was deciding whether to stop. They stopped. Celestine was in the doorway. She did not come in. That was the thing Renata would remember later. She did not cross into the kitchen, did not pull out a chair, did not make it into a moment longer than it needed to be. She stood in the doorway with one hand resting against the frame, and she looked at the kitchen the way you look at something when you are actually seeing it, not just registering that it is there. The clean counters, the stacked dishes. The centerpiece Renata had carried in from the dining table at some point without thinking about it, without deciding to, just moved it in here so it wouldn't be alone in an empty room. Celestine was not an easy woman. Renata had known that from the beginning and had made her peace with it, or something close to peace. There had been years of careful navigation, holidays, where Renata had measured every word, phone calls where she had listened more than she spoke, small moments of exclusion she had absorbed and not mentioned to Marcus, because mentioning them would have cost more than the moments themselves. Celestine had not made it easy to love her. Renata had loved her anyway, the way you love someone who is permanent in the life of a person you have chosen. So when Celestine spoke, Renata was not prepared for what she said. If you have ever been at the end of yourself, truly at the end, where you have nothing left to perform and no more room to absorb, and someone unexpected saw you, just for a second, just enough, drop no in the comments. Because what happened next in that kitchen doorway is the kind of thing that only means something if you have been in that kitchen. You are watching Tails and Bants. Celestine said, "You put on a beautiful Christmas, I should say that more." Then she turned and went back down the hallway. Renata stood at the sink with her hands still in the water that had gone cold twice now. She could hear Celestine settle back into the living room. She could hear the movie. She could hear, faintly, Desiree saying something that made two people laugh. She reached up and turned the hot tap on, just enough to warm the water back up. She did not know why. The pot was done. There was nothing left to wash. She turned it on anyway and stood there while the temperature changed, and she thought about what Celestine had said, and she did not cry, and she did not deflect, and she did not tell herself it was nothing. She said thank you to an empty doorway. And then she turned the tap off and dried her hands on the dish towel folded over the oven handle and stood in the quiet kitchen and felt something shift in her chest. Not dramatically, not like a door swinging open, more like a window that had been painted shut for a long time and someone had finally run a knife along the edge of it. She was not finished deciding yet, but something had started. The last car left at 9:47. She knew because she heard the door and then Marcus's voice outside saying goodbye in that particular way he had when he was relieved the evening was over but did not want to show it, and then the sound of his boots on the porch steps coming back in. She was at the kitchen table, not cleaning, not organizing. Just sitting, with a cup of tea she had made for herself without asking if anyone else wanted one, which sounds small, and was also the first thing she had done all day entirely for herself. Marcus came into the kitchen and looked at her the way he looked at her when he knew something had happened and was hoping she would tell him it hadn't. He was a good man, she had always known that. A good man with a blind spot shaped exactly like his sister, the kind of blind spot that forms in childhood and calcifies so slowly you don't notice it happening. He looked at the clean kitchen. He looked at her at the table. He said, "You did good today, Renata. Everything was great." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "Thank you." That was all, not because she had nothing else to say, because she was deciding, in real time, what she was going to spend her words on from now on. She had made the decision sometime between the empty doorway and drying her hands, not a dramatic decision, not an announcement she planned to make, but the kind of decision that settles into your body and stays there. Next year she would host Christmas. She would buy the tree and write the place cards and make the yams the way Celestine had shown her. She would do all of it, but she would send the invitation to the people who wanted to be there, not the people who always came. Not the people who arrived 2 hours late and rearranged the furniture and left without saying thank you. The people who wanted to be in her home, and she would know the difference because she had always known the difference. She had just been pretending she didn't. She wrapped both hands around the mug. The ceramic was warm against her palms, the tea already cooling toward the temperature you can actually drink, and she sat in the kitchen she had cleaned twice in 2 days and felt, for the first time since 5:30 the morning before, like the room belonged to her. If you have ever decided, quietly, without a speech, without anyone else in the room knowing it happened, that you were done making yourself smaller so other people could feel comfortable, drop mine in the comments. Because that is what Renata did at that table. She took the room back. You are watching Tales and Bants, and if this story found you at the right moment, hit subscribe, because there is always another woman at another kitchen table, and her story deserves to be heard too. Marcus went upstairs. She heard him moving through the room above her. She stayed at the table a little longer. The centerpiece was still in the kitchen, pine branches and dried oranges, and in the warmth of the room it had started to release its smell again, that particular combination of something living and something preserved, sharp and sweet at the same time. She had not noticed it until now. She sat with it. There is one thing the story does not tell you. Whether she went upstairs that night and told Marcus what the day had actually cost her, not the version that sounds manageable, not the version that protects his feelings about his sister, but the real version, the one that starts with "I was standing in cold water in my own kitchen and nobody came to check on me." Whether she said it, whether he heard it, whether anything changed. That part is hers,